A battle to the death. Classic albums clashing till there's only one left. A killer contest, but before we get to it, there's rules to this game, so let me tell you how we do it. 8 classic albums, 1 classic year. Draw 'em out the hat and chew the fat right here. We rate 'em, relate 'em, discuss 'em and debate 'em, analyze the beats and quote the lyrics verbatim. When all is said and done, we put it to the vote and tell you which of them is one. Then it's to the semis and the final for the vinyl cassette or CD. So who will it be? We going all in, so on the sound of the whistle, let the games begin. Record shot. To the hip, dip, the hop, you don't stop.
Hello and welcome to Hip Hop World Cup, the podcast that pits golden age hip hop albums against each other in a contest to find the ultimate champion. Joining me in the Hip Hop World Cup studio, the multi-million pound state-of-the-art facility we've recently had built, are Steve Hitchcock. How you doing, Steve?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you.
Yeah, and James Luscombe. How you doing?
Very good, mate. You are going to pay me back the money I put into the studio.
We might have to talk about that off afterwards, if that's all right.
We're going to get a big payoff from it, you said.
Yeah, we will. Trust me, lads. We will.
Okay.
So 1990 is the year we're doing in this episode. Very much just sort of post the early years of hip hop as it starts to transition into the golden age as we know it. Overall thoughts on 1990 without getting too deep into the album. Steve, what are your thoughts on this year in general?
Yeah, I think it's like you said, it's golden age, but I don't think it's kind of like vintage. It's this kind of like a bit of a junction. You can see albums going in different directions here. You know, there's some that are starting to get a bit rougher, some that are getting a bit more soulful, lots of political kind of conscious rap going on. And it's not quite as refined as we want it to be in like kind of the middle of the golden age, but I like it. I think it's a good year, just not a vintage year.
Yeah, I'll go along with that. It feels to me like the sort of year when all the producers are finding their feet in a way. They're kind of, you know, they're experimenting, they're just finding their sound. You know, a lot of the people we're really into later in the 90s is just kind of their early stuff. Larry, what are your thoughts on 1990?
Yeah, I think there's kind of one exception to that, which, you know, we'll get on to later, but I think you're right in saying that a lot of them are kind of setting the groundwork for later albums that are better, but in similar styles to what they're kind of previewing here. But I think it was the year. It's the year that like we got into hip hop, isn't it? Basically, I think the kind of the first stuff that we liked was from before 1990, but 1990 was definitely the year that we started listening to it. But quite a few of the albums I didn't kind of know at the time.
Yeah, I'd go along with that. It was very much in our sort of very early formative years of being into hip hop, given sort of age we were around the time, and it was very much sort of finding our feet as well, you know, in terms of how what we liked and stuff. And because we were so young and kind of getting into it, we weren't aware of all the albums that were coming out in this year.
Yeah, definitely not.
Yeah. So
it's also quite strange in that there are kind of some really commercial albums, like 2 really obvious commercial albums being like the MC Hammer album and the Vanilla Ice album. Yeah,
which criminally aren't in here.
Both artists I kind of quite liked at the time, but also like the really hardcore stuff as well. It's quite an odd mixture of stuff.
Yeah, it was a weird sort of weird period of time. You had this pop rap was just kind of becoming a thing. So, well, with that in mind then, obviously we won't reveal what albums we've got yet, but let's talk about some of the honourable mentions, the ones that didn't get in, very briefly. Steve, let's start with you. Let's just give me a couple of your kind of honourable mentions that you wish kind of perhaps were in, or...
You know that I'm deeply frustrated. You know, I appreciate this as a World Cup and, you know, there's a qualification system here, but in my mind, there's two of my favourite albums from this year just aren't even at the World Cup. So, the Lord Finesse album, Funky Technician, I think it's such a fantastic album, and also kind of set things up really nicely for some albums that kind of followed with the DITC crew. And then Paris, The Devil Made Me Do It. I really, really like that album. it's a little bit kind of samey all the way through, but I like that. I do like it. It kind of feels like a good long player. So actually, I'm really disappointed we can't see those two perform on a World Cup stage. You know, I think they'd have done actually quite well in this tournament.
Yeah, some big names in there. The Lord Finesse one. I think Lord Finesse was pretty much one of the architects of the sound, wasn't he? And to not have him among this, but again, probably that shows what it's a fairly strong year. If people like Lord Finesse aren't getting in, then kind of says good things about the year. What about you, Larry? Any
to be honest, I mean, I struggled to come up with an 8 to get in, for the final 8 anyway. So there are no kind of. I mean, what about? And it's not an album; it's an EP. But 100 Miles and Running, that was 1990, wasn't it?
I think so. Yeah. And here's where we hit a bit of a grey area. We've reached a kind of consensus that we're not including EPs, which could be quite controversial in it because it means we can't include things like 100 Miles and Running and Kill at Will, both of which came out in this year. But
I mean, if it were included, like 100 Miles and Running would be in there for me, and it would be in contention for the top spot, I think. Yeah,
I'd go along with that as well. And then Kill at Will, I love Kill at Will. I think there's some absolute bangers on there. So listen, without further ado, then let's get into the business end of what we're trying to do here. We're going to get into the Hip Hop World Cup itself.
Ladies and gentlemen,
it's the damn hot World Cup. Rules to the shit. Damn hot World Cup. Rules to the shit.
There's rules to this game, so let me tell you how we do it.
It's the damn hot World Cup. Rules to the shit. Only strong survive. It's the damn hot World Cup.
So here are the rules. Using a scientific process of shortlists and horse trading, Danny, James and Steve agree on a list of 8 albums from the chosen year, which will compete for the Hip Hop World Cup. In each round, our pundits draw the albums from a hat to decide who plays who, then discuss each match and vote for the album they want to win. Albums with the most votes progress through the rounds to the final, where the lads vote again to decide which album is the undisputed Hip Hop World Cup champion. Let the games begin.
So we have Public Enemy's Fear of a Black Planet, LL Cool J, Mama Said Knock You Out, BDP, Edutainment, Eric B and Rakim, Let the Rhythm Him, Brand Nubian, One for All, Ice Cube's America's Most Wanted, EPMD's Business as Usual, and A Tribe Called Quest's People's Instinctive, blah, blah, blah. I can't remember the title, but you know the one, their first album. So, without further ado.
Ridiculous title,
what is it? People's Instinctive
Travels in the
Paths of Rhythm. Of course it is, thank you, that was a test. But that's your 8 albums. Those are the World Cup finalists. So without further ado, let's head over to the FIFA headquarters where we'll find Stephen Hitchcock with a bag of names for the first match in round 1.
Damn hot World Cup. Round 1. Damn hot World Cup. Round 1. Damn hot World Cup. Round 1. Damn hot World Cup. Round 1.
Okay, here we go then. Out first is Business as Usual.
EPMD.
Classic album. Classic sound, classic album. Going up against Ice Cube. America's Most Wanted.
EPMD v Ice Cube.
Okay,
right. Well, so I think first to go on this one is you, Steve.
All right, okay, so let's start with the EPMD album. I really like this album. It is classic EPMD sound, isn't it? It's like that really kind of funky, raw, rough, rugged, and there's some really kind of like classic lines in there. I think the rapping is a kind of a bit rough and rugged as well at points, but I think it's if you like EPMD, this is I think a really good album. Lots of really good tracks, and for me, to get through in this World Cup, there needs to be some great tracks and some classic tracks. I don't think there's anything classic on there, but I think Rampage, classic track. Manslaughter is a great track. Gold Digger, great track. And Rappers Out of Control. So I think there's enough enough really good stuff in there to make this a really good contender to go against Ice Cube. One thing I don't know what you two think about this. It's like always bothered me. Is the Jane tracks on all the EPMD album? They just feel like they're just like nonsense. I don't even really properly understand what's going on.
Who is Jane? What is it about? It's like a joke you're not in on. That's how I always feel when I'm listening to them.
Yeah, I just can't figure out. It's like, what's the point? But there is a little bit of filler on there. So yeah, that for me is a good album. Now, Amerikka's Most Wanted. I don't know. You know I'm not Ice Cube's biggest fan. And
here we go.
Yeah, here we go. I think it starts really well, actually. I think it does start really well. I like the first kind of few tracks. And I think it's definitely one of his better albums, better than most of his other albums. But for me, it just isn't a kind of good long player. It's not something that I can like listen to all the way through and enjoy, and it's not something I kind of want to go back and keep listening to, apart from maybe those kind of like first few tracks. But I do get it. I get the fact this is like, it is kind of classic, you know. Ice Cube is a classic rapper. This is his debut solo album. The production is kind of like really innovative and kind of you know, sets the style for albums that kind of follow. But yeah, for me, it's not a strong album.
Oh, that's a shame. Okay, well, yeah, interesting. James, what are your thoughts on this matchup?
Amerikka's Most Wanted. I think I became properly familiar with it like later on in life. I think I remember a few obvious tracks from back in the day. The obvious one being like Gangsta's Fairy Tale. That was always a bit of a quotable kind of at school. I remember with the what's the guy that they sampled in it? The comedian Andrew Dice Clay, I think.
Andrew Dice Clay, yeah.
But I love that track. Gangsta's Fairy Tale is brilliant. Once Upon a Time with the Projects is great. I think I kind of, when I, like in my mind, I think I probably thought I liked this album more than I do now that I kind of listen to it critically. I think it's kind of, like the Bomb Squad production is better on Public Enemy's stuff, I think. I think it better suits kind of like Chuck D than Ice Cube. It's a lot, like the production here is a lot more sparse than the Public Enemy stuff. And kind of lacks any of the kind of, I don't know, like the complexity or the scale of like the production, like the Public Enemy productions. Not to say that it's bad, but I don't know. I think there's only kind of a couple, like a few standouts really. Like those being like, as I've mentioned before, like Gangsta's Fairy Tale is great. Once Upon a Time in the Projects, like, you know, really good storytelling. You know, love the beat, even though it's quite a simple one. Lots of like quotable little bits in there, really memorable. I think the first track, that, you know, the N word you love to hate, is an absolute, that's a 5 out of 5 classic. You know, really kind of comes out the gate strong with that one. But yeah, there's a fair amount of filler. I think once it gets kind of beyond like Gangsta's Fairy Tale, you're into solid 2 out of 5, 3 out of 5 track territory.
I'm so to hear you say that, Larry. That makes me feel so relieved.
There's quite I think like there are strong tracks on there definitely, but it's the first half of it. It gets a bit weak, and yeah, by the time, I mean, Who's the Mac is pretty good. But apart from that, the second half, I'm just thinking about kind of the next album I'm going to put on, basically. And yeah, like Steve, I think it's definitely, I don't even know if it's his second best album, like maybe The Predator is better. Don't know. But still generally solid. I still like it. I will still listen to it in the future. And I have no problem with people kind of saying that it's a classic, it's seminal, it's an important album, there's like a good story behind it. Moving on to the EPMD album, I was never, like, EPMD are just a group that I'm not massively familiar with. I think I'd have really loved the album if I'd have got into it at the time. I really love the kind of samples that Eric Sermon uses. I think he is the producer, isn't he, of the two?
They both are really, but yeah.
Right, and he's a good rapper as well. Like Parrish, not so much. Although I've kind of got a bit of a soft spot for some of his tracks with his kind of weird voice. I think the main kind of difference between this and America's Most Wanted is that while Ice Cube's album has a few standout tracks and then some kind of poor tracks towards the end, I think this is just mostly, like, filler's not the right word, it's better than filler, but they're all sort of 3 out of 5 songs for me, like the majority of them, apart from like a couple 4s, like I'm Mad, Manslaughter has got that sort of nice sample, I think, like Love Unlimited Orchestra, I think.
Are those official True Score, Larry's, that you've done there?
These this is from the patented True Score format, yeah. But most of them, yeah, just 3s out of 5, and no, it's just I think it shows the importance of having some standouts on an album like Ice Cube does. I think like a couple more really good tracks would have gone a long way to kind of this just being being a better album in my opinion. But I definitely see how people like it. I can see how people are big EPMD fans. I like the general vibe of their stuff, even if I'm not kind of massively familiar with it.
Interesting.
Which scores were the highest on True Score?
For Business as Usual?
Yeah.
It's those ones I just mentioned, really. So I'm Mad. I don't really know how any of these tracks go. The only one I can remember is Manslaughter, because it has like I think it's a Love Unlimited Orchestra sample, Danny. So that's you can't go wrong, kind of looping that up and rapping over it, really. The other one being Brothers on My Job. So again, I don't really know how it goes. I just know that I've given it a True Score rating of 4.
I mean, that's fairly high, in True Score type. It
is really.
True Score terms.
Yeah, it's not bad. Like, it's rare that there's only 1 5 on America's Most Wanted, to be honest, which is the N-Word You Love to Hate. Once Upon a Time in Project is a 4.5. Actually, Gangsta's Fairy Tale was a 5 as well. But
there we go. Just before I launch into my thoughts, have you had any commercial interest in the True Score technology yet? I mean, I know you were touting it around.
I can't really go into the details, but yeah, there looks like there might be like a $1 million deal on the table.
Really?
I have let the people know that deal does come off the table.
Yeah, and you're involved in that deal, are you?
Yeah, and I won't take a penny less than that.
Okay, well, absolutely. I mean, some of these big aerospace companies could do with a way of evaluating hip hop albums.
Well, there's a rival to the system. There's Real Rate, which they're talking about leasing some of the tech behind it, but yeah, it's proprietary stuff. I shouldn't really.
Yeah, sorry, I shouldn't have brought that. I shouldn't have brought that
more than I should already, to be honest.
I shouldn't have brought it up. Sorry. Okay, so what do I think about these two? Well, in a way, I'm pretty disappointed that EPMD has come up against Ice Cube in a way, because I love, well, starting with the EPMD album, I think I was never really an EPMD guy, but this was always my favourite of the ones that I did have. I just think it comes in really strong right from track 1 with I'm Mad, and just doesn't kind of let up as you go through. I mean, it's the samples are really good, it's exciting, and the thing I always did like about EPMD was that sort of interplay between the two of them. I love hip hop that kind of, they'll take parts of a verse each and they'll switch between the two of them. I always loved that, and EPMD are really good at that. I just think, I think the earlier EPMD albums, of what I've heard of them, they're a bit more sort of basic, a little bit more rudimentary. As I say, they haven't really, this is the first kind of 90s sounding album that they did, obviously because it's in the 90s, but it's kind of had that, the samples they were using were very, that sort of later hip hop style. And I just absolutely love it from start to finish. There isn't a track I don't really like. This is one that I had. I think I recorded it off somebody. I dubbed it onto a cassette, and it's one of those cassettes I just played over and over and over again. I love Hardcore, which introduced us to Redman. That was his kind of first appearance. They just took a snippet from. Oh no, they took a snippet from it for his album when it came out a couple of years later. Rampage of LL, absolutely love. I mean, yeah, that Def Jam kind of tie-in, you know, that's a great track. As you say, Manslaughter's really good. You can't go wrong if you're looping up a Barry White sample. I really love it. Gold Digger was a single, one of the singles off this album, and the video used to be on MTV Raps. Used to absolutely love that track. And I just, it's one of those. I never had to fast forward any. I loved every track, loved the production, loved the interplay, and in a way, I'm kind of gutted that it has come up against Ice Cube, as I said, because for me, Ice Cube, this is an absolute masterpiece, start to finish. It's just everything about it, the beats, the samples, that Bomb Squad flavour. It's just instantly makes an impact. You put it on, and it just all the way through. It's just a great album. Really significant in that it was his first solo album, moved over to the East Coast, and it's really got that sound. I think Larry, you're probably right that the Bomb Squad did it better for Public Enemy albums, but I do think this is a really good sort of capsule of their sound. I think it's all in there, chucking loads of samples in, little skits, just chucking loads and seeing what sticks, and it just really works for me. And I think also, this was the album that underlined that Ice Cube was the lyricist from NWA, so the lyrics are really on point. He's really angry. He's got a lot of hunger. He really goes for it on this album. And there's as you said, there's so many memorable lyrics. So Gangsta's Fairy Tale is one that just sticks in the head. I just, for me, these are two really, really strong albums that I absolutely loved. Again, Amerikka's Most was one I had on a really scratchy, hissy tape back in the day, and I just played it so much. And so it's a difficult one for me, this. But I think when it comes to the crunch, I think I know which one I prefer. But without further ado, I think that's it, gents. Should we vote which one we want to go through?
Yeah.
So to start with you, Steve, what gets your vote?
Well, I think because it's got more great tracks and better production, I'm going for Business as Usual.
Interesting. James, what do you think?
I think that makes it interesting because I'm going for Ice Cube because I'm more familiar with it. I've got more fondness for Ice Cube. Not that I would kind of let that be the deciding factor, but I just think, generally speaking, it is a better album. I think it's got. If you had to disappear one album from the archives, it would be such a shame to get rid of Amerikka's Most Wanted against Business as Usual. I think. It's just a better album. I've got nothing against the other one. I think if I'd have had it from back then, it would be a little bit more of a close run thing. But yeah, for me, it's Amerikka's Most Wanted. Kind of just about tips it.
Yeah,
It's interesting. So I honestly don't know which way I think I know which way you're going to go, but I wouldn't kind of stake.
Yeah, well, it's just really difficult for me because, as I say, Amerikka's Most Wanted is just such a masterpiece to me, and anything that came up against it was going to struggle. And it really kind of disappoints me that EPMD has come up against it because it's one of my kind of 6 from this year that are my absolute stone cold classics. But that's a reality of World Cup hip hop football, is that somebody's got to be beaten, And I think from that score. Yeah, I think my vote goes to Amerikka's Most Wanted. It has to, really. It's just a much better album. It's sort of it's more vital. It's more sort of vibrant. Its impact on the hip hop world is greater. Yeah. What it meant at the time after he left NWA. I just think all round it's the better album, the more significant album, and I just can't see anything else deserving to go through. To be honest with you, so.
I mean, you can't be surprised by that, surely.
No, it was because I was secretly hoping one of you was going to choose it, because you spoke more positively about it than I expected. So I just had a slim hope, like a 90th minute winner was going to kind of be nodded in, but.
Yeah.
I
think it's a bit of an unfair matchup. I think Danny and me are probably giving it a little bit too much weight for it being like an important album by a kind of significant rapper.
I think it's more of a significant album than a great album, if that makes sense. I don't think it would ever. I don't think I can listen back to it and think that's a great album, but I can see the significance of it.
I think I would probably think it was better at the time as well, like for the same reasons.
Yeah. I mean, 100%. I mean, yeah, there was no sort of contest back in the day. I mean, Amerikka's Most was always the better album then. I think it is now, reevaluating. It's just, I've got a real soft spot for that EPMD album. I'm not an EPMD guy, but that album was one I played loads. So, yeah, but I think that's the right result. So, yeah, Amerikka's Most Wanted by Ice Cube goes through to the semi-finals.
Come on, y'all, get live, get down.
Hip hop World Cup.
In your sound. Come on, y'all, get live, get down.
Hip hop World Cup.
In your sound.
Hip hop World Cup.
Here we go. So, match number 2 in the Hip Hop World Cup for 1990. Steve, what we got? Let's have the first one out of the hat.
Okay, the home team is Edutainment.
Okay, cool. Edutainment, Booty Get Down Productions.
Against, that's a good one, Nubian, One for All.
Okay. Right, so the first up on this one is Larry. What are we thinking about this one?
Yeah, this is quite a bit of a weak matchup for me, and it's a bit of a struggle to kind of know who's going to go through. But yeah, Edutainment I'll start with. I think at his best, like KRS-One is like as good a rapper as like anyone from this kind of generation. But I just don't really kind of like the beats, especially sort of the earlier, like the BDP stuff. They're just a bit too sparse, bit kind of plodding, like leaden production, really. It's also like far too long. I think it's like 20 tracks, and it's got quite a few skits on there, but just, outstays its welcome. Far too much, really. There's only one track that I really like, which is Love's Gonna Get You. Which I've always liked. It's a really good piece of storytelling. Absolutely love it. Like, probably the best beat on the album as well. And the only other one is like Beef is quite good. Like, Danny, I know you like that one yourself, but Beef's okay. It's like a really novel concept for a rap song. Like one of the most kind of novel concepts, I suppose, for a rap song that I've ever heard. But like KRS-One for me and BDP, like I've got my sort of introduction to him really was a compilation that I got around about sort of 2002, something like that. It was like all of his best stuff from like solo and from BDP, and it's really, really good. But I just think he's a best of rapper for me. Like I haven't really sort of come across any albums that I've kind of liked enough to kind of put as a favourite. So yeah, it's not a great album. Like I don't think really. And the other one for All, I didn't have this back in the day, so I've only kind of really listened to it over the last week or two, and I don't know. Yeah, I don't want to kind of be too harsh on it. It's not a terrible album by any stretch of the imagination. It's not. I mean, the way it sounds isn't like massively dissimilar to like Tribe Called Quest and kind of similar like Native Tongues type kind. It's got similar beats and themes and raps. I really love Grand Puba and Sadat X like as rappers. Like Grand Puba 2000 is a favourite album of mine. That'll obviously feature in, I think it was like 95 and
95.
when we come to do that, that'll be up there. But I don't know, just the beats are a bit primitive for my liking, really. They're just all kind of 1 or 2 bar loops, and I think the more inventive sort of albums from this era, just even then, are kind of a lot more complex. I mean, like, as I say, the obvious one would be kind of comparing it to Tribe Called Quest or De La Soul, who are doing sort of much more complex stuff. I don't know, there's not much memorable on it, really. Try to Do Me is quite good, sort of a New Jack Swing kind of thing. I quite like that. What else have we got on there? I think there are albums that I rate it above, from these 8, if I'm being completely honest. And I can see why someone who grew up with it would kind of like it a lot more than I do. And I can even see how like such a person could make a case for it being as good as the Tribe album, maybe. But for me, I have no attachment to it, and I just don't really care for it an awful lot, to be honest.
Yeah, interesting. I totally echo your sentiments on this matchup as well. This feels like a bottom of the table, Group G tussle to decide who doesn't finish bottom. I think what's happened here is that Edutainment's kind of snuck in because it's one of the ones that a couple of us knew better than other ones. Yeah. And I think when we sat down to actually evaluate it, we realised that it's not actually that good.
I think if we had all kind of listened to all of the available albums from the year, it probably wouldn't have got in, really. Yeah, like maybe One for All would have. I don't know, but
here's the thing. This is so I sort of lobbied for Edutainment to get in, and because it's one I had on a dubbed tape, and I used to listen to it all the time on my Walkman, and I used to love Black Man's in Effect. As you say, I loved Beef. Like Beef, to me, that beat on Beef is just not. I've never heard anything like that at all. And I don't know where
weird, isn't it?
It's really weird, and I don't know where that sample came from. And also the subject matter. It's one of those that just really stuck in my head. Beef, what a relief! I love that.
Yeah.
And I just think that really made it stand out. And I think what's happened is that track has made this album stand out in my head a lot more, because I didn't have it on CD until like later in the noughties. I kind of bought it retrospectively because I only had it on tape, which kind of tells you maybe a bit about it. But I just always felt it was, it's among those albums that I love. So when I reevaluated it, I still loved all the tracks I loved. Black Man in Effect, Beef, Love's Gonna Get You, which I absolutely love. They used to play the video on MTV Raps, and it was like a black background, and they were stood in front of it. And of course, it's where Got Myself at Uzi and My Brother in 9 comes from, off the Snoop Dogg album. And also sampled by Warren G on his version of I Shot the Sheriff, when he goes, all I can think about is Warren. It's like it's rich pickings for like little sampled bits. I think that is
like KRS One is like prime for that.
Yeah. I mean, this is brilliant storytelling rap. I just love this track so much. And again, I think that's what's like inflated my this album in my memory. I think that's what's kind of happened, because I love that track so much. But as you go on past that, you've got. I remember the tracks, and they're all okay, but they're very much. There's lots of beats on there that are just beats. It's like a beat with him rapping on it, and sometimes I feel like it's kind of like an album that you might play in a classroom to a bunch of kids to educate them on, because it's literally, as the title said, it's education. So each and every track is him going off on a subject, and sometimes I don't know. I'm not sure I really want that from my hip hop albums. As intelligent as he is, as a good rapper as he is, as influential as he is, it's just a little bit. What's the word? It's quite hard work getting through this album, and there's a lot of skits and a lot of, there's a lot of stuff. So my overall sort of takeaway of this album is it mixes some really good stuff with too much really poor stuff, and there's a couple of things on there, like some of those we were talking in the last episode about cod reggae tracks. There's a few of those on here, and it's just like, it's embarrassing.
It's really bad for that, isn't
really
it?
bad. So I think the good tracks that I love off this are good enough to make me happy that I suggested this to be in here, but in retrospect I really don't think this is a great album. in terms of trying to find the best one for the year. So moving on to Brand Nubian again, I was never really a Brand Nubian guy. The first album of theirs that I bought was 93's In God We Trust, which isn't a great album either. So I had to kind of retrospectively listen to it. So I'd never owned it on any format or anything. So I got it in kind of like on MP3 later on. And I don't know, I do feel it's one that I could probably imagine myself having liked at the time, as you said. It's got all the right elements in place, jazzy samples, good lyrics, just quite fun, quite upbeat. Grand Pooba, I love Grand Pooba just like you, Larry. 2000 is one of my sort of my all-timers. Slept on album, and I don't know. I just don't think it quite grabs me listening to it today. But I do feel it's a little bit unfair, and I know its importance in the culture, and I know it's regarded as a classic album. And also, Slow Down is absolute banger. I knew that's the one I knew. That's the one I knew from back in the day. With the Eddie Brickell and the New Bohemian sample. What I Am, it's such a great track, and it's kind of like right at the end as well, I think, unless I've got a weird copy of it, but I just don't think this album I know well enough, or there's enough, it doesn't stand out enough for me to even consider it going through to the final, but we shall see. But so okay, it's a tricky one. I still need to form my opinions on it, so let's hand over to Steve for your thoughts while I mull it over a bit more.
Well, maybe I can help, because I definitely agree with you on one album. I disagree with you on the other. I definitely agree with everything you said about Edutainment. And I think, Danny, the word you're looking for, it might be a bit kind of indulgent. I think he's just he tries too hard to do too much on this album. And if he actually got a decent producer and was able to kind of rap over some decent tracks, I think this would be a much better album. I think it's like you said, it has got lots of good tracks and only one kind of classic track. But yeah, it makes me quite cross, Danny, that you managed to get this album in here instead of The Devil Made Me Do It and Funky Technician. But
do you know what? I'm starting to agree with you a little bit, but like it snuck in because it's one I know, and I don't know those two either. So it's a tricky one, isn't it? Do you go for ones that you've listened to retrospectively and try and judge it on a technical level? Do you go with the ones you have some sort of personal connection with? And for me, it's the latter. But hey, that's Hip Hop World Cup.
So I do disagree with you both about Brand Nubian, probably slightly. I think this is a good album. I think it's really funky, it's really soulful, and Danny, you said it's quite a fun album as well. And you've both kind of said like Grand Pooba definitely stands out, and there's some really great kind of quotable lines on there. On the dedication, the old school track, we wouldn't be here today if the old school didn't pave the way. Love that. And yeah, some great tracks. I think Concerto X in minor is a great track on there. Slow Down is obviously classic. I love the Brand Nubian track on there. I just think it's really funky. Wake Up in the Sunshine remix. And obviously Dedication as well, I think it's really good. So I think there's definitely enough good, and there's some great tracks on there to make this a really good album. And it definitely feels like it feels like it's a little bit out of place in 1990. It feels like if this was like in 92 or 93, it would have fitted in better into that kind of era. So yeah, hopefully, Danny, you can see your way to voting for Brand Nubian here.
Well, I mean, it's a difficult one. Well, you're I think it's Larry's first to vote on this one, so let's see what he has to say.
Yeah, for me it's quite obvious actually, which is the best album, and it's Brand Nubian. I think I would be more on Steve's page if I was more familiar with it, even if I got into it during my sort of second wave of being into hip hop, sort of in the early 2000s. If I bought it then. In fact, I might have bought it. I don't know. I don't have much. Yeah, I think one for all is just it's funkier. It's more up my street musically. Just being completely objective about it, I think it's just kind of a more musical album. It sounds good as well. That's one thing I forgot to mention before actually, is that being someone who's kind of into like music production and engineering and stuff, I can never completely ignore kind of sonic quality of albums, and actually this one sounds really good for an album from 1990, I think. So yeah, I'm going to go for One for All.
One for All. So that's one vote for One for All. Is that a true score verified?
It is a true score verified
verdict.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. And so coming on to me then. I mean, this is harder than it should be, really, because on one hand I've got Edutainment, which I have a personal connection with. You know, the tracks I love off this album I really love. Whereas Brand Nubian, I had to listen to it for this and try and work out with, you know, sort of judge it objectively. I think One for All is the better album. And I think even though it pains me to say it, because of the attachment I have to Black Man in Effect, Beef, Love's Gonna Get You, I think I'd prefer those to be a little 3-track mini album, or an EP as they're known. But there's too much filler on Edutainment. So I think for that reason, I'm just going to have to say Brand Nubian One for All, just sort of putting my objective hat on for a change, and just saying, yeah, One for All gets my vote. Steve, over to you.
Well, I think it's obvious where my vote's going to go, but before I officially cast it, I do want to say how much I do love KRS-One. I think he is one of the greatest rappers, and it is Definitely. just such a tragedy that he actually hasn't had a properly classic album. And we went to see him in Exeter a few years ago, didn't we? And it was so sad to see him perform in front of about 100 people. And this is like one of the most technically gifted musicians, rappers in the world. And he just hasn't been able to, I don't know, reach the potential or I guess commercially reach his potential.
Yeah. But I think he's probably about more than that, isn't he? I don't think that really matters to him. I think he's after respect and credibility.
He seems like a bit of a pain in the arse, if you know what I mean. Like KRS-One, like I think he takes himself a little bit too seriously, maybe.
Yeah, maybe that's his downfall. I mean, that show was it was a good show that we went to, Steve, wasn't it? I couldn't understand a single word he said. That sound system wasn't doing much for the clarity of his voice, but yeah, I mean, he puts on a show and he did not stop from start to finish, jumping up and down, and
he's about 70.
He's about 70, yeah. So he, you know, let's not get it twisted. You know, he's a legend in this industry, and you know, I just feel like he delivers albums that just don't inspire that feeling in you. You know,
Love's Gonna Get You is probably the best track from this year. It's definitely my favourite track from this year. That's taking a bit far, but yeah, it's one of them.
I wouldn't quite go that far, but it is really good. I've always loved that track.
Yeah, brilliant track. Okay, so it's unanimous then. So we're all voting for Brand Nubian One for All. So that's the one that's going through to the semi-final. All good. Right, okay, let's move on to match 3 from round 1. Steve, you got the your ball bag?
Yep, my bag.
Yeah, 2 big ones left in the ball bag. Let's have it.
That's Blatter's ball bag.
I don't know if we want to draw these big guns against each other. Let's see what comes out.
Right, Steve, what we got?
So, home team is Let the Rhythm Him.
Okay, Amerikkka and Rakim.
Amerikkka and Rakim.
Versus...
Against... Mama Said Knock You Out.
Okay, so we're very like a punching theme across the board on these 2 albums. Hitting.
You know that does mean that we've got Public Enemy against Tribe Called Quest in the remaining.
Oh, heavyweight. That's a big one. That's a Portugal v Spainer. That is. Okay.
That is a big one. Anyway, we'll worry about that in a minute.
All right. So who we got? So first of all, that's me. I'm up first on this one, and Amerikkka and Rakim. So where do we start? I mean, LL Cool J. I mean, this one had it on cassette. That's going to be my catchphrase in this podcast. I had it on cassette, and rinsed the hell out of it. I think I mean, going through it, I love the singles. You had the Boomer System, Around the Way Girl, obviously Mama Said Knock You Out, which, well, I'll talk about that separately, but I think apart from, obviously, aside from that track, for an album, you want it to be more than one song, and I do think there's a lot on here that really, make this album really strong from start to finish. I used to put it on, listen to it all the way through. There's a couple that are sort of on the sort of New Jack Swing that kind of R&B type vibe, but Around the Way Girl is one of those. It was one of the singles, and although it's got that kind of R&B flavour to it, I just loved that track back in the day. I just love it. The Mary Jane Girl sample, just one of LL doing one of his pop rap, what he's really good at, sort of one of those pop hits, and so I just find that track irresistible. The Booming System sampling On Vogue, really strong start to the album. I think it's produced by Marley Marl. I think there's a story. I think there's a story behind that track about how they made it for the clubs, and I think they knew that On Vogue at the time was a massive track, and they made it knowing that it was going to hit because that beat really hit. And as you go through it, I mean, like, I've always found LL Cool J to be one of the best rappers. Like, I love, and I'll get probably pilloried for saying this, but I love Walking with a Panther because the album before this is because there's just so many good tracks on that, and his lyrical dexterity in that album is amazing, and he carries it through onto this album. And some of the stuff, like, he really kind of, in some of these, he's really showing off, like in Murdergram. He just absolutely goes for the jugular. Like, he's undeniably one of the greatest MCs of all time. Don't let I Need Love, and things like that fool you. This guy he's the real deal. He's amazing. So yeah, I just absolutely I love this album. But yeah, Mama Said Knock You Out is the undisputed highlight. I mean, it's you can put it on any time; it'll just get you going. Like, I wouldn't say it's like a masterclass in like nuanced rapping or sort of wordplay or lyrical dexterity. He is literally shouting about how much he's going to punch you. But just something about the way, the anger with which he delivers it, and just something about the energy of the track and that sample, it all kind of merges, it all kind of blends so brilliantly into this anthem, and I think it's in the conversation for, like, those standout hip hop tracks of all time. I think it's just up there. It's got that sort of status. It's got that instant goosebump feeling. So, YouTube, I'm no doubt will argue that there's some weak stuff on here. To the Break of Dawn, I think he disses Cool Mo D on that one. I mean, that's a little bit kind of lightweight. But just generally, I just love this album. I just think the beats are great. I think he raps really well on it. It's just a really solid album, a knockout, if you will. And then the other one, Eric B and Rakim, it's a good album. I think it may well be another one of those where I'm being swayed by the ones that I loved. Like Let the Rhythm Hit Him was always one I would put on mixtapes. Like I would always put it on my hip hop mixtapes. Loved it to bits. Rakim's really great on this album, and then it goes into No Omega, and No Omega, the beat of No Omega is just phenomenal. It's funky. I think it's a James Brown loop or something like that, but it's just I absolutely love it. And it starts off with the scratching. It just comes in, and Rakim doesn't take his foot off the pedal all the way through. I think it's just an absolutely incredible track. And then after that, it kind of peters out a little bit. They start being a bit samey. And Eric B Made My Day could do with not being on it. But then you come through to track 8, Mahogany, which was always one I absolutely loved. So I think the beat is an Al Green sample. And him talking about this lady that he wines and dines and sort of, schmoozes. And I just, like, that track always stands out for me. I love that. But as I say, I think everything around it, having reassessed it recently, I think it's my love for this album is built on perhaps 4 tracks. I throw in The Ghetto in there as well, which I love. But I think there's some really weak stuff on here. I know this is one of the albums that The Source gave 5 mics to as well. That's kind of like back in its early days. I didn't think they quite knew what they were doing with those mics back then. But I wouldn't say this was a 5 mic album, but I do think there's enough on it to reinforce A, that it's a good album, B, that Rakim is one of the greatest lyricists of all time. I know that's really cliche, but he really is. So yeah, I think 2 strong albums. I'm going to need a bit of time just to decide who I'm going to vote for. But yeah, two good albums. So I'll hand it over here to Steve. What are your thoughts on this pairing?
I think you're right. I think this is really close. I think the first thing to say is that I think both of these albums are kind of like classic 1990s. They're kind of well matched. They've both got good rappers. They both sound very similar. And for me, I'll talk a bit more about it, but I think they both actually work quite well as like long players. I like listening to both albums all the way through, and I don't kind of get switched off. They're just enjoyable, and for me, you need that for a good or a great album. So Mama Said Knock Me Out. I think like I didn't really get into LL Cool J until quite recently, because I think like you were saying, Danny, I think I just thought of him like, rapping over like Loungin' and all those kind of like pop tracks, and I thought, I'm not going to like him. But then I listened to all his early stuff and I was like, actually, blimey, he's a really, really good rapper. He really can, do it. And the Mama Said Knock You Out track, that was in response to Walk Like a Panther being kind of dissed, wasn't it? And his grandma said, go and knock them out. And I thought, and you can kind of feel that all the way through that track. And it is a classic track. I really, really love it. Like you said, Danny, anytime it comes on, you're just like, wow, this is amazing.
Are you surprised that you didn't put it as track one? Like, because if it was me,
I sort of assumed that it was track one. I was surprised to find that it wasn't.
Yeah, I don't know. If I was LL Cool J, which I'm not, I'd like to make that absolutely clear. But I would have put it track one, sort of bang straight in there. But then maybe saved it for later because, leave something in the tank, to get you.
Yeah, Booming System's a good start of track as well, isn't it? I think I like that. So yeah, I think it's a really good album. Works well as a whole album, but there's a little bit of filler in there. But I can kind of like just deal with that because I like most of the other stuff on there. And then Let the Rhythm Hit Them. I think it's a really good EP. I think for me, there isn't any filler on this album. Every track is at least good. The rhyming is just so smooth. He just flows so brilliantly across everything. I think the beats are actually pretty smooth all the way through. And I think my only kind of criticism is that there probably isn't like a really classic track on this album. I think Let the Rhythm Hit Them is a really good track. No Omega, like you said, Danny, is really good. I like Run for Cover, Mahogany. I really like Keep 'Em Eager to Listen and Set 'Em Straight. I think that those kind of two tracks kind of end the album really nicely, which adds to my kind of enjoyment of the whole thing. So I think this is just really close. Two great rappers, pretty much well produced, and they both sound like they're from 1990. So yeah, I'm gonna have to think really hard about who I'm gonna choose here.
All right. So what are your thoughts on this heavyweight tussle, Larry?
I mean, I'm not as enthusiastic about either of them as you two. I don't have like a great deal to say about them, especially like the Let the Rhythm Hit 'Em. I was going to say the Eric B and Rakim album, but it's just I think we're kind of like not quite sure what Eric B does.
Which brings up it's an ongoing theme, isn't it? It's going to be an ongoing theme. It's like what do these named artists do? Eric B being a prime candidate.
I'm guessing he must produce it, I suppose.
It was Large Professor mostly produced this album.
Yeah.
Right, then I just don't know what he did then in that case. I think he's a bit of like an Andrew Ridgeley figure, maybe. He's like just like a mate, like Rakim's best mate.
Yeah.
Just kind of he's brought along.
Yeah. Well, you stand over there, Eric B, and just watch. I'm just going to make this record, and you just go and watch. But my name's going to be on it. My name's going to be on it. Yeah.
I can be on. Yeah, I can be on it.
Yeah.
Maybe like they did it around his house or something.
Maybe. They let him use his stuff.
Yeah.
It's like maybe like him and DJ Polo get together sometimes. They just sort of like bitch about Eric being called you rap. Anyway. I mean, I can't deny how good Rakim is, obviously, but I don't, as we kind of spoke about last time, I think I didn't really have his stuff at the time or kind of get into him. Like, he's somebody who's kind of, I know his reputation more than I kind of know of him, really. But for me, I think that like the beats are just a bit kind of primitive
on this one for me. It might not be fair to say, because it is still quite early in the history of hip hop, really. But when you put it up against, even like against like EPMD, it doesn't really compete beat-wise with that. Like, let alone like the two Bomb Squad produced albums we've got here. I think he kind of is best over like fast beats, where he can really show off his flow. And they're just like, from memory, they're all a bit more down tempo. It doesn't really get the chance to shine, like in my personal opinion.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I couldn't really bring myself to listen to the whole album through. I found myself skipping it quite a bit. And like when you two were talking about tracks that you really like, I'm kind of looking at my scores and kind of sort of scratching my head a bit over them, really.
You must have loved No Amerikkka though.
That's got a 2 out of 5.
Really? That's incredible.
That's based on just kind of listening to kind of little snippets of it.
Have you calibrated True Score? Did you? Because normally you calibrate it in the morning before we record.
Properly calibrated. I put it through.
And you?
I oiled them.
You put oil. Yeah, I was going to say you put oil in. Yeah.
Plenty of oil in it. Fed it some nuts and bolts, and it's got like put a new tape in it. It's absolutely, it's working fine. It came out. Like I use Illmatic to calibrate it. It came out 5 out of 5 for that.
So when it came out with 2 out of 5 for No Amerikkka, it didn't have all smoke coming out of it or anything. It was fine.
No, it seemed to hit it with a spanner, and it seemed kind of word back into action. It said hit me no more.
Okay.
But no, so yeah. I mean, I'm willing to accept it, that it's just the fact that I didn't have the album at the time, and yeah, just don't really have an attachment to it. And objectively, I just think it's a bit boring, and it's not very well engineered. Like just the mix and master, just compared to like One For All, which I said actually sounded really good. This one just sounds a bit kind of dusty. Not in a good way, just a bit flat. Not a massive fan. Mum Said Knock You Out. I can very distinctly remember like listening to this for the first time, like at your house, Danny, when you first got it, and just being absolutely blown away like by the title track, and just immediately wanting to listen to it like over and over and over again, and just having it lodged. Like that song just lodges in your mind, basically. A real earworm. Probably one of the best kind of uses of funky drummer, I think.
Yeah.
Even though it's probably been used loads of times at that point, but it just sounds really hard and fresh, and just absolutely great. Probably the single of the year, I think.
Yeah, I would have to go along with that.
And just an absolute classic. Like, would never tire of hearing it. The only other the other track that was the standout, which surprised me a little bit, is Around the Way Girl, because I think I just in my mind I'd kind of seen it as another kind of like I Need Love or something like that.
Yeah.
Without kind of having really listened to it, but it's actually it's good. I like the way like the verse and the chorus differ.
Yes.
Like the verse is quite hardcore. I think it's got like the Kenny Burke sample.
Yes, yeah, rising to the top.
Which is something you can't really go wrong with. Really atmospheric. And then it's got that kind of sort of New Jack Swing kind of
the bass line
chorus, which is really good. Like who are the singers on that?
I think it's the Mary Jane Girls. I think it's You Got Me Shook Up, that one. And I think Kenny Burke rising to the top in the verses.
So those are the two standout tracks. I think the title track is just like the essence of hip hop, really. But the rest of it, like a lot of it, is just kind of like 2s and 3s out of 5s for me. It's even got a 1.
Go on.
For Milky Cereal.
Good. I'm glad. That is an awful track.
But I think for me, like what's interesting about this matchup is that I think LL Cool J is another one like Rakim who I never became like really familiar with. I do prefer him to Rakim actually. I think he's got like one of the best voices like out like in hip hop history. Like his delivery is great. I just never kind of had enough of his stuff to be really into him. But I like the early, I like kind of the like radio and Rock the Bells and stuff like that. And I think those tracks are kind of good examples of just rapping over very spare beats in a way that's kind of that does it better than like KRS One. It's just better production. Like Run DMC as well, similar stuff, just kind of basic but just better. Like it just kind of stands, like the beats stand up on their own a bit more than like the KRS One stuff. Yeah, so I don't have a massive amount to say about this album. A lot of the tracks are just a bit wishy-washy, I think, like in my opinion, apart from those two tracks I mentioned. But I don't begrudge anyone. I wouldn't begrudge anyone considering it a classic.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's his best album. I mean, there's so much good stuff on it. I haven't heard anything. I think the ones before this were too basic, that sort of old hip hop style, and I think the later ones, I think he went a bit too commercial. Even though Mr. Smith's a good album, I think there's absolute bangers on there. But I just think this was him at his absolute peak with this album, and I think for me it's just the lack of familiarity. I have no beef with anyone kind of really liking it, and I'm sure I would if I was more familiar with it. Right. Yeah, absolutely. So the final whistle's blown on this particular tie, and I think it's time to vote. So I think, I'm going to go first on the voting this time. I think for me, there's no contest really. I think while there are some absolute classics on the Eric B and Rakim album, Let the Rhythm Hit 'Em, No Omega, and Mahogany, I think a lot of the other tracks are a little bit dry, a little bit kind of one note. I just don't think it's got the sort of power to beat LL Cool J's Mama Said Knock You Out. I think Mama Said Knock You Out has just got so many good tracks on it. Yes, there's a couple of fillers, but I think for me it's a no-brainer. It's Mama Said Knock You Out. So yeah, Steve, what gets your vote?
Oh, this is so hard. For me, this is just, it's so close to cool. Like I keep changing my mind. So I'm gonna try and be a bit scientific, and I've written down 6 tracks that I really like for LL Cool J, 7 for Rakim. I think Rakim is a better rapper. I really like Large Professor as well, so I'm gonna give it to Let the Rhythm Hit 'Em.
Okay, that's a left field.
Yeah,
fair enough.
I just think I'd much rather go back and listen to Rakim than LL Cool J. I think that's probably kind of like settled it in my mind. There's definitely Mama Said Knock Me Out. The title track is phenomenal, and it is one of the best tracks this year. But
yeah,
I'm going to stick with Rakim.
Yeah, fair play. So, which brings us down to the casting vote, Larry.
Yeah, I mean, what do you have an inkling what I'm going to go for based on what I said?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, I think for me, like Let the Rhythm Hit 'Em is probably my joint bottom of this whole kind of enterprise, really, like this and Edutainment. So Mama Said Knock You Out is only a kind of middling album for me, but it does win this bout.
It does win this bout. There we go. So there's our next semi-finalists. LL Cool J's Mama Said Knock You Out, dumping Eric B and Rakim's Let the Rhythm Hit 'Em Out. Okay, so moving on to match 4 in round 1 of Hip Hop World Cup for 1990, we have an absolute heavyweight tie now. I don't think I can even bring myself to think about this one, but we've got Public Enemy's Fear of a Black Planet up against A Tribe Called Quest's first album, which again I've forgotten what it's called. People's Instinctive Travels and the Paths of Rhythm. Okay. So, right, Steve, you're up first on this one. What do you think about this one? How does this contest, how does it come out for you?
Well, probably not surprised to hear that. I think this is one-sided, but probably not the way that you think. So I think the Tribe Called Quest album, Travels and Paths, is an excellent album. I think it's not completely classic, but for me, this is the best album of 1990. I think Q-Tip is a genius, and I think I've come to appreciate more and more as I've kind of got older how good he is. I think he produces some really classic beats. He raps really well. I think Five Dog's not particularly brilliant on this one. He kind of comes stronger on some of the later albums, but it's still really interesting to listen to. It's a really different album, and to place this in 1990 when there was loads of the kind of, I don't know, more kind of old school rapping going on, and then the more political conscious rapping, and all the gangster rapping going on. There's just so many likable tracks on this album. There's, you know, Can I Kick It is obviously an absolute classic on there. I think Push It Along is a great track. Luck of Lucian, After Hours, I Left My Wallet, Benny Trappelbaum. And then Youthful Expression is absolutely brilliant. And then it does kind of peter out a little bit at the end, but I can kind of forgive it that because it's got so much good quality. It's like got that kind of like boom bap sound all the way through. So for me, excellent album, my favourite album this year. And then controversially, Fear of a Black Planet is one of my least favourite albums of this year. And this is probably going to really annoy both of you. It's just...
Can you just say, sorry Steve, can you just say that again? I think my headphones are broken.
I just don't like it. I can't get into it. And I've been thinking about this a lot this week because I knew you two are going to be cross to me. I can understand how it is a pioneering album. It's, you know, it's got that kind of political edge to it, but I honestly think it's overrated. And I keep going back and listening to it over and over again, thinking, what am I missing here? But actually, I think I like my hip hop albums to be a bit more kind of soulful, and this is quite like sonically manic, and it just feels completely different to the sorts of thing that I like. And I think Public Enemy are overrated as a hip hop group. I think they're hugely influential, and I don't mean them kind of any disrespect, because I know that they're really popular and I know they're really pioneering, but I just can't get into them. It just doesn't suit my ear. And for me, again, controversially, there's no standout tracks on there that I think I'm going to put them on my, you know, favourite 1990 track list or favourite tracks of all time.
I think somebody might be getting a little visit from the S1Ws.
I do like Welcome to the Terror Dome. I think there's some like there's some classic lines on there that are kind of quite quotable. And actually, I think Flavor Flav does kind of wake me up a little bit when on the Can't Do Nothing For You Man. That's the kind of like a track that does wake me up a little bit. But I'm really sorry. I think these are probably two albums at the opposite end of my hip hop like ear, and I don't think I can do anything about that. I'm really sorry. Over to you.
Fair enough, Larry. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I don't agree with Steve at all, but I can see how you could just not like the Public Enemy sound. I do get that. It's really abrasive, and yeah, it's not soulful or jazzy in the sense that Tribe Called Quest is jazzy. So yeah, I mean, for me, I think I'll talk about the Tribe album first. I didn't really become familiar with it until I think like the early 2000s, apart from like Can I Kick It? And I don't think it's not as, I also got into it after I got into like Midnight Marauders and Low End Theory, And it's not as good an album as either of those two, but it kind of really sets the stage for what they're going to do, like with those albums and the rest of their career. I think Steve is right in kind of in what he said about Q-Tip. I think Q-Tip is like the unsung kind of hero of hip hop, really. I think like you have to be sort of quite deep into it to kind of to appreciate him, I think. I didn't really sort of find out until much later that he basically does all the production for the Tribe stuff, apart from kind of later on, like when JD gets involved. But he produced like these 3 first albums. He's also produced, you know, like One Love and like the Crooklyn Dodgers track, and just, you know, loads of other kind of ones.
Mobb Deep.
Just like, yeah, he's also just an incredible rapper as well. Like, he's got one of the all-time great voices and flows, and he's just so like charismatic to listen to. He is absolutely incredible. And this album is really good. I think it's a bit front-loaded, which I think kind of Steve alluded to. It kind of, I think, up to like Can I Kick It? I'm not a huge fan of. I think from there onwards, it's a bit kind of fillery, apart from Description of the Fool, which is like one of the best tracks on the albums.
Yeah, I love that one.
Love that. Great sample. Doesn't come to me at the moment who it is, Danny.
I think it's Roy. I always thought it was Roy Ayers, but I saw the other day that I think it's a different version of Running Away. I think it's somebody else. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I might need to get back to you on that one, but yeah, I think it's.
It doesn't sound like it, but
no,
fair enough.
No, I know. Yeah.
But it starts out really like I love like Luck of Lucian's great. After Hours is great. Footprints. I think it's got a Rock Creek Park sample, I think, in there, which you can't sort of really go wrong with. Benito Rappelbum, like you really can't go wrong with that ramp loop. That's an absolute classic. Like the track Rhythm is quite interesting. It's got those kind of weird, like sort of almost like ravey, like chords in it. But that's quite a sort of distinctive track. I love Tribe. I think this album is really good. Moving on to sort of Fear of a Black Planet, I just the complete opposite of Steve. I absolutely love it. It's one of the kind of earliest hip hop albums I remember being familiar with. I think, and I remember you buying it, Danny. I think it might have been W.H. Smith, maybe. Am I right?
Yeah, I'll break it down in a minute.
Yeah, but I remember you having it. I always loved about Public Enemy how it the cassettes had all the lyrics in it. And it'd have like shouts out to like all of the other rap groups, like the Extra Strength Posse and like stuff like that. And they're quite similar to NWA really, in that they've both got like a really kind of sonically like quite abrasive sound, really kind of angry sounds, like militant in different ways. And I think kind of where NWA sort of opened you up to that kind of like street life, basically, people like us would have just had no concept of. I think like Public Enemy like really kind of opened the door into just like all the civil rights stuff. Like, I don't think I knew about any of that. I mean, I kind of credit Public Enemy with all of everything, like the little I do know about like the civil rights movement. I know it all of the names I kind of know from Public Enemy, like, the Huey Newton and like the Panthers and all of that kind of stuff. So it kind of felt like it was introduced into sort of something like new and important. And I think they're probably I think a lot of people fall into that same category of kind of being introduced to that whole world through Public Enemy. And if Public Enemy didn't exist, I think I just don't think that in the UK at least we'd know about all that stuff really. I think they're a really like genuinely important group in kind of getting people to think about that kind of thing. More importantly than that, though, really, I suppose, like musically, is it was kind of like nothing I'd heard before, and I'm kind of talking about them generally rather than this album, because I think I did hear Nation of Millions before this one, but this I think is the kind of like the peak of the Bomb Squad sound. I think it's just it's just a bit better than like Nation of Millions. Everything from sort of Contract on the World Love Jam right through to like Burn Hollywood Burn is just like an incredible run of tracks. Brother's Gonna Work It Out, absolutely incredible. Welcome to the Terror Dome, incredible. I love sort of like Instant whatever it is, kind of like with the, I think it's like the Howard Stern
66
kind of show cutout, just really iconic. Probably Wanna Cracker is really kind of weird, because I think I didn't realise until about a year ago that it's Chuck D rapping on it.
I knew that a long time ago, but it doesn't sound like him. I think
just didn't really occur to me. Maybe I sort of, it didn't really, it's just like, it sounded different. But Burn Hollywood Burn, I love. It's like 3 classic verses. Like Big Daddy Kane's verses is especially good on that. And again, it's about subject matter that just wouldn't have ever occurred to me as being like an issue, like unless kind of I heard it in this song. And I think like Public Enemy, like and Spike Lee just completely revolutionized like how people think about stuff like this, and was so influential on cinema later. I think it trails off a bit in the second half, the album. Actually, I think sort of from Power to the People onwards, there's a lot of filler in there. Like the title track, I really like, actually. I really love the way like their voices sound on that track. Like it sounds like really metallic.
It's weird, isn't it?
Through like a ring modulator or something like that. This sounds sort of alien. I really love that. Raw 33 1/3 I really love. That's kind of like really energetic kind of track. And then Fight the Power, obviously right at the end.
Great ending.
Another classic. There are some weaker ones, like Leave This Off Your Fucking Charts and B-Side Wins Again.
Reggie Jacks.
Count as dull as dishwater. Revolutionary Reggie Jacks, definitely is kind of, But the first half of it is just absolutely incredible, and just the kind of thing that just, what was there kind of that sounded like this before this and like Nation, is just like revolutionary sounding, and just I was kind of hooked as soon as I heard this kind of stuff, really. Compare it to some of the albums from this year, it's just so, like the complexity is incredible, like so many samples being layered up, not many people doing it like Prince Paul would be like the other, and Dr. Dre like to an extent as well, but I don't think he was as good as like Bomb Squad were for this kind of thing. It's just for the reason Steve doesn't like it, I absolutely love the sound, basically just the controlled chaos of it. It's just all of the other albums, I think I could produce lesser versions of them. I wouldn't kind of really know where to start like producing any of the tracks on this album.
I kind of echo a lot of that. I'm on the same page as you with this album, really. Let's go back to the beginning. Like, cast your mind back to 1990, a young lad wandering into WH Smith, and I bought this on cassette, and it was the very first hip hop album I ever bought. And I hadn't heard anything like it. It's just absolutely incredible. It's kind of one of those albums that just kind of like hits you over the head. I think it's such a dense production, like all the way through it. It's a density of it. It's just, there's so much going on, and they pack so much into it. And it's like, as you say, like if aliens landed and they said to you, like in a really weird situation, like, all right, tell us what the Bomb Squad sound like. Okay, if you can imagine such a thing. That's the first thing they ask. You give them this album, you go, right, well, that's what they sound like. Go back to your home planet and tell them all about it. This is the Bomb Squad sort of encapsulated in an album. I used to listen to this relentlessly. After Contract on the World Love Jam stops, Brothers Gonna Work It Out is just like an absolute punch. It just comes in. I love that track. And you say the whole first half of this album is so strong. It's just, they just layer the samples in. You got Chuck D like dropping knowledge, with his usual anger, and sort of nobody else does it quite like him. He's got one of those most recognisable...
I've never understood a word he says, though. Really.
No, not in terms of the concepts he's trying to relay. Like, a lot of it is very highbrow, and you don't quite know. But I guess that's what makes him so good. But he delivers it with such sort of gusto and authority that you you can't help but be sucked in. And then you go on to 911 as a joke, which they used to play the video a lot, and I loved the video for that. But I always wondered what would happen in real life if Flavor Flav had some sort of medical emergency, and had to rely on the emergency services to get to hospital. Would they turn up and go, look, Flav, fair's fair? I don't know. Anyway, so 911 is a joke. Welcome to the Terror Dome is the single. I think I had this on 12-inch as well. I loved it so much. I mean, Welcome to the Terror Dome is an absolute classic. It would be another one that would be up there on the list of best singles of this year. I just think it's an absolute banger. There's loads of sort of weird tracks on this album as well. And also what I would say, I think I got into this first and then Nation of Millions. And for me, Nation of Millions has got more goosebump tracks on it, like ones that absolutely make me go wow. But for the sort of emotional connection and what it means to me, this album, this is my Public Enemy album. This is the one that means the most to me. So Burn Hollywood Burn, great verses, Big Daddy Kane. There's Ice Cube on there as well. The second half does tail off. There's a few sort of like you say, Reggie Jackson on the second half. It does tail off, and there's a lot going on, and they're not as memorable, but they bring it back with Fight the Power right at the end. I don't know. I think this is a really, really strong album to me anyway. But when you couple it with the personal attachment I have to it and the history, and this was my introduction to Public Enemy, I love this album so much, and I love the cover artwork as well, which I just adore. Going on to A Tribe Called Quest. So again, as we say, we got into hip hop kind of around in 1990. So this is one I was aware of. Can I Kick It? I knew some of the tracks, but for me, I'm a Low End Theory guy, and I got into Tribe Called Quest through Low End Theory like a year later. This one I never really connected with, even though on paper it's more my sort of album, like the jazzy samples, the more sort of playful tone, jazziness, soulful. I love Q-Tip as a rapper. I do think on paper, like if I didn't have a personal connection with Public Enemy, this would be more up my street. And don't get me wrong, there's some absolute classic tracks on here, and some of the samples they use. I love Luck of Lucian, but Benita Applebomb, that ramp sample was timeless. Love Description of a Fool with that sample, the Running Away sample. So there's so much good stuff on this album, but I just didn't know it as well, and so I always sort of first and foremost loved Low End Theory and revisited this one afterwards. So doesn't hold up as well as me when placed against Public Enemy, but that's just me. I don't even own this album on CD, which tells you most of what you need to know about this album. Really, I never bothered to buy it. I only ever had it on tape. But it's an amazing album, so don't get me wrong, it's great, and I know another one that got 5 mics in the source, highly regarded, introduced you to their sound. I just never connected with it as much as I did Low End. So in terms of voting, this is going to be quite difficult, but I'm going to come back to you, Steve, to get your winner. So what are you going for?
Well, I feel like the black sheep here, aren't I? I kind of always vote against you two, and I feel like maybe I'm in the wrong, but I think you obviously have a personal connection, both of you, to Fear of a Black Planet, and I just struggle to get into it, and I don't know.
Do you feel like we're ganging up on you a little bit?
I don't know. I feel like you've got such a strong attachment to those albums because you were into it at the time and I wasn't. And actually, I think like when you were talking, I kind of like normally think of myself as someone who likes those more like sonically manic, like harder to listen to albums because they kind of grow on you and you really appreciate them. And it doesn't matter what I do, I just can't seem to like this album.
Yeah.
Pulls and Paths, I think it is a master, whichever way you look at it, it's a masterpiece. And so for me, it's an easy winner and a clear winner. It's Travels and Paths.
Fair play. Okay, Larry, what's your vote?
Yeah, it's definitely Fear of a Black Planet for me, no question about it. I'm kind of it's a shame that these two came up against each other. Really, I really would have expected like try to go into the final to be like certainly into the second round. So yeah, I don't think it would have ever won the whole thing for me, but it would have been interesting seeing it come up against Amerikka's Most Wanted. I think I would have been it would have been a bit more of a difficult decision. But yeah, definitely Fear of a Black Planet for me.
Piggybacking off that, I'm going to go for my vote is Public Enemy Fear of a Black Planet as well. I'm afraid, Steve. I mean, it's for me emotional attachment, but I think generally it's just the more kind of engaging, vital album. And I Public Enemy gets my vote. And that completes our semi-final lineup. We have Brand Nubian's One for All, Ice Cube's Amerikka's Most Wanted, LL Cool J's Mama Said Knock You Out, and Fear of a Black Planet by Public Enemy. Stay tuned, we'll be back after this for the semi-finals.
Semi-final. Semi-final. Who's that going to be? World Cup. Semi-final. World Cup.
Hi, welcome back to the multi-million pound Hip Hop World Cup studio, embedded deep in FIFA headquarters in Zurich, probably. Steve Hitchcock is our stats man. He's currently wandering around a green screen studio holding some sort of tablet, just working out the draw for the semi-finals of the Hip Hop World Cup for 1990. Steve, how's it going over there in the studio?
Yeah, really good. I've actually got Funkmaster Flex here to help me to do this semi-final draw. He's just joined us on Zoom.
But contractually, he can't speak, is that right?
He can only use his hand to pick out a piece of paper, yeah. It was too expensive to get him to speak and to rap and to...
All right. Hi, how you doing, Funkmaster? Can I call you Funkmaster, or is it just nod if it's... Okay. All right, yeah, so Funkmaster. All right. So, okay, we're ready to do it then. So let's go. Semi-final number one. Who's first out the hat? Who's the home tie?
The home tie goes to LL Cool J and his mama.
LL Cool J's Mama Said Knock You Out versus...
Ice Cube, Amerikka's Most Wanted.
Ice Cube.
Oh,
what
that's going to be a good tie.
A tie. Okay, that's a big one. That's a heavyweight one. Okay, Larry, let's go. What have you got? What are you going for on this one? Putting these two side by side.
For me, I can see how this would be kind of a big matchup for some people, and how people kind of might regard LL as, important as Ice Cube. For me, I think it's kind of quite clear who I'm going to go for. Ice Cube is, he's my favourite rapper of the two, and I have a lot more affection for this album. I'm more familiar with it. It's got to be Amerikka's for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Larry. So that's well, let's hold off on the vote, but that's Larry's opinions. For me, LL, I've got such affinity for both of these. They were both albums that I absolutely rinsed back in the day on cassette, of course. It's really, really tricky. I mean, you haven't on Ice Cube, you haven't really got those standout singles, have you? I mean, there wasn't really much off this album that kind of made an impact in the same way as Mama Said Knock You Out. But I just think, in terms of the impact it had on me, in terms of the replayability, and this is really hard for me, lads. This is quite difficult, actually. But I think when you weigh it up, I think Ice Cube is the stronger of the two albums. I think overall, in terms of a cohesive piece of work, I think in terms of the message, I think in terms of the impact, I do think that Ice Cube was a stronger album. So yeah, I think that's kind of where I stand on this. Steve?
I'm going to be in disagreement again. I'm really sorry. The Ice Cube album, I'm going to say again, I think half of it is good, half of it isn't. It doesn't really go well as a long player for me. I like there to be more good tracks on there. I don't love the LL Cool J album, but it's definitely got more good tracks and a classic track on there, only a little bit of filler, and I much prefer listening to it as a whole album. So really close though. Two really good rappers, two well produced albums. two classic 1990 albums. So yeah, that's what I think.
So let's make it official. So Larry, who are you going for in this semi-final?
Cube.
Steve?
LL for me.
All right, well, it looks like I'm the casting vote, and I think on balance, I think in terms of impact, I'm going to have to go for Cube. So Cube's America's Most Wanted is the winner of that first semi-final. Steve, how do you feel about that?
Predictable, I think, just because I knew you two would go for that, and yeah, I'm not disappointed because that LL album's not my favourite. So
no, but don't get me wrong. I love LL's album. I love the LL album to bits, and it kills me to have to not put it through.
I think you're going to need to vote with your head more than your heart, Danny, and I would be happier.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, okay. Well, that's your first finalist. That's Ice Cube's America's Most Wanted goes through to the final.
Come on, y'all, get live, get down.
Hip hop World Cup.
In your town. Come on, y'all, get live, get down.
Hip hop World Cup.
In your town.
Right, so let's move on to semi-final number 2, which, if I'm not mistaken, is Brand Nubian's One for All versus Public Enemy's Fear of a Black Planet. Quite an odd pairing. Feels to me like one of those sort of semi-finals at a World Cup that Wales is involved in, and they've come up against Spain or something. But let's go for it anyway. First to talk about this one is me, and I mean, that's an absolute... I mean, if you had to do the dictionary definition of a no-brainer, I mean, this would be it. I mean, Public Enemy got such an emotional tie to this album. First hip-hop album I ever bought. It's such a dense, complicated, technically impressive album with a lot to say, lots of memorable bits, some absolute huge singles and songs. Whereas Brand Nubian, not one I ever messed with at the time, don't really know it that well. Love the singles, love Slow Down, but I mean, this is a David and Goliath for me, in which Goliath wins. So I think when pushed, I would have to say Fear of a Black Planet is my winner, but I'll reserve official judgment until we've all given our opinions. But Steve, what are your thoughts on this matchup?
Well, I'm not deliberately going to be controversial here, but I'm definitely going for One for All here, because it's, for me, I need something that's more soulful, that's funkier, that's kind of more enjoyable to listen to, and Fear of the Black Planet just doesn't do it for me. I think if I'd listened to it in 1990 and had spent longer listening to it, I'd probably be more into it, but I'm just not. So I'm going for the underdog, I'm afraid. One for All does it for me.
Yeah, okay. And James, what are you going for? What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think there are 4 members of Brand Nubian, I believe. You've got Sadat X, Grand Hoover, Lord Jamar, and the other one. And I think the other one is probably the only other person that would come to the same conclusion that Steve Hitchcock has just come to. I think even then he'd be lying to himself if he actually thought that One for All was the stronger album than the universally acknowledged, stone cold classic Fear of a Black Planet.
Yeah. Well,
I do feel terrible. I don't know anyone else that agrees with me, but I have to go with my head and my heart.
You have to go with your heart. That's absolutely it.
Yeah, it's only an opinion.
Yeah, and sometimes Wales do get to the World Cup finals, don't they?
Do they? Yeah, they sometimes in their dreams. Yeah, sometimes.
I would just kind of characterise it as, like in life, there are people who have racist views and transphobic views. Are they wrong? Who knows? Really, it's not an opinion I agree with, but it's their opinion. And Steve is someone who kind of shares similar opinions about, rap albums.
Yeah, he can't help it. It's just
it's just the way he's been. It's the environment he's been raised in. And
genetics.
Product of his environment.
Well, should we make it official then, gents? So, what are you going for, Steve? Have we done that? Brand Nubian. Larry, you're going for
Public Enemy.
Public Enemy. I'm, of course, going for Public Enemy. It's an absolute no-brainer. So yeah, that's your other finalist. So Fear of a Black Planet is the winner of this one. So the final is going to be Fear of a Black Planet by Public Enemy versus Ice Cube, Amerikkka Most Wanted. Incredible. Hello, you join us here pitchside at the Hip Hop World Cup final, live from the Amerikkka in Brazil. 120,000 people in the stadium for this showdown between Ice Cube's Amerikkka's Most Wanted and Public Enemy's Fear of a Black Planet. Are you hyped for this one, guys?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can feel the excitement. It's palpable. Steve's got his tablet. He's punching in some data about the previous rounds just to give us some stats. Larry's you're just firing up the true score machine. I can see you pouring some sort of substance into that. Just tell us a little bit about that.
It's a liquid.
A liquid.
It's a viscous liquid. A mix of a blend of several different oils.
And just to make sure it's accurate.
Oils and vitamin tablets.
Brilliant. I'd love to hear that. Okay, so we're going to get started. Public Enemy versus Ice Cube, two Bomb Squad productions. Let's start with you, James. What are your thoughts on this on the final?
Yeah, well, I think it's inevitable, really. That I think this is the fairest, final that we could have hoped for. But it does make it quite a tricky one, on paper at least. I think if we had thrown this out to a public vote, I think it would really come down to the wire. I wouldn't really like to kind of say who I think would come out on top. But for me, I just I absolutely love Fear of a Black Planet for the reasons I've outlined already. I do wonder if I'd been more familiar with Amerikkka's Most Wanted at the time, maybe it would be a bit of a closer run thing for me. But whereas with Amerikkka's Most Wanted, I'd skip through the album now. I'd still quite happy listening to it now, but I wouldn't listen to it end to end. Fear of a Black Planet, I would just be more excited about listening to now, and know that there are many more tracks on there that I really love.
Okay, yeah. So, Steve, what are your thoughts on the final? This is a massive match. I can't call it, but
well, it definitely isn't the final that I wanted to see. My two favourite albums aren't even in the competition, and I would love to have seen Tribe Called Quest get to the final, just so they could have been in the final. And I think deep down, I always knew that it was going to be one of these Bomb Squad produced albums that was going to kind of win it. But for me, personally, I prefer the Ice Cube album. I think it's just got a better kind of sound to it. It's I only like the first half. I don't think it's a good long player, but there's some really kind of innovative tracks, and I think Ice Cube is a superior rapper to Chuck D as well. So I think not the final I wanted, and I wasn't going to get the final I wanted, but I'm going to go for Ice Cube, which will make it an interesting choice for you, Daniel.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, I got the casting vote now. Brilliant. Look, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. This is an absolutely impossible decision for me. These are two albums that kind of emerged right at the start of my sort of hip-hop love, and both of which I just loved back in the day. They're sort of like the building blocks of my love for this sort of music. Two albums that are, I had at the same time listened to as much as each other. It's difficult. I think Public Enemy, I've got like a history with it that kind of makes it really hard for me to say anything bad about it. But I don't know. There's part of me that when I listen to the Ice Cube album, I find it a little bit more exciting to listen to. Like the Public Enemy album, it's got great stuff, but it does kind of, the second half is a bit harder to get through. I think if I'm stepping back and judging these side by side, I think Ice Cube is the more exciting album all the way through. Like I love It's a Man's World right at the end of America's Most, and like Who's the Mac is right towards the end. I can listen to it knowing that those tracks are coming, whereas when I listen to Fear of a Black Planet, you get After Power to the People, you cut into the second half, and you've kind of got to wade through Who Stole the Soul and Revolutionary Generation and Reggie Jacks and B-Side Wins Again. I just think pound for pound, I think Ice Cube is probably the more exciting album, and it's got more goosebump moments on it for me, I think. So I'm really kind of torn on this one. These are two like seminal albums for me from the year when I first started getting into it. So
go with your head.
I know I'm going to go with my head. But if I go with my head, they're both head and heart albums. So I just don't know. I just don't know which way to go.
This is when you need a scientific means of assessing albums like True Score. It's why it's so valuable.
All right.
why I think I will end up signing that deal on Monday.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm thinking of maybe coming up with my own rival system to try and. Copyright.
Talk about that separately. I'm not sure if you come up with a better tech than what I've got, really. And that would be stupid to have two separate systems on the same podcast, wouldn't it?
Yeah, you're right, but. I think they could work side by side.
It's what they call in the corporate world, like cannibalising your own sort of ideas.
I don't know. I might have to do. I don't know. Listen, I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to do it. I'm just going to plunge straight in. The album I'm voting for is Ice Cube, America's Most Wanted.
What?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I love Fear of a Black Planet so much, but I just something about America's Most Wanted that speaks to me, excites me, and I'm sort of driven a bit more by how it makes me feel, I think, these days. There was a time I probably would have gone for Fear of a Black Planet, but I think I'm going to vote for Ice Cube. I think I'm going to go for that. So as much as a shock that is for you, James.
Yeah, I do get it.
Yeah,
I understand. Like I said, I think if you put it to a public vote, I think it would be a really, really close run thing.
Yeah, I do think it's. I mean, again, like you say, this is the final. I think it's pretty much a fitting final. Some argue maybe Try being in there would have been fitting, but I do think it's a fitting final. I do think it's a two.
This is a 7-goal thriller, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that went to extra time. But I think overall, I'm very happy to have Ice Cube, America's Most Wanted, as our overall winner. So yeah, that's it. That's 1990. Thoughts on that outcome, Steve?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's been a good tournament. I've enjoyed the tournament. There's no question about that. You know, it's been good World Cup hip hop. Yeah, obviously very disappointed didn't get to see the albums that I personally liked a bit more. But I wouldn't say I'm happy that Ice Cube won, but I'm happier it won than Public Enemy
or Edutainment. So that's good. Can you imagine if Edutainment had won? Unbelievable. And
just imagine if KRS had a decent producer. It'd be a different world we'd live in.
Exactly. Well, he should have thought of that, shouldn't he? And how about you, Larry? What are your final thoughts on the winner here?
Yeah, I think it came down to the correct two teams. I think it would have been nice, I think, if the Tribe album just lived up to its kind of early promise. If it just had a few more kind of classic tracks on there, then I would have found it really difficult to choose between that and either of the other two albums, because obviously, like, the two Bomb Squad albums are fairly similar sounding, cut from the same kind of cloth, whereas Instinctive Travels is completely different, but no less good. I really love the sound on it. It just doesn't quite have enough songs for it to have won. So I don't know. I'm not going to say that I think the right album definitely won, but I'm not going to argue against it too much, really, even though it's a bit of a personal upset.
Yeah, Yeah, fair enough. Well, that's the World Cup for you. That's Hip Hop World Cup. That's why we love it. So there you have it. Ice Cube, America's Most Wanted, your winner for 1990. What do you think about that? Hit us up on Twitter and Instagram at Hip Hop World Cup, and we'll see you again soon for another instalment. See you later.
A battle to the death. Classic albums clash until there's only one left. A killer contest, but before we get to it, there's rules to this game, so let me tell you how we do it. 8 classic albums, 1 classic year. Draw 'em out the hat and chew the fat right here. We rate 'em, we slate 'em, discuss 'em and debate 'em, analyze the beats and quote the lyrics verbatim. When all is said and done, we put it to the vote and tell you which of them is won. Then it's to the semis and the final for the final cassette or CD. So who will it be? We going all in, so on the sound of the whistle, let the games begin.
We are.
Mama said knock me out.